Why your peace breaks their control, they are losing control over you. And it's destroying them. There are individuals whose entire existence hinges on a single fragile pillar: control. They are the architects of emotional chaos, the strategists of manipulation. They don't study character. They analyze patterns. They aren't looking for genuine connection. They are scanning for weaknesses. And when they encounter you, someone they cannot decode, someone who refuses to be confined to their predefined limits, their carefully constructed world begins to unravel. Their self-perception of dominance starts to disintegrate from the inside. Their whole game plan relies on predicting your next move, understanding what stimulates you. But when you ascend above their tired tactics, when you become so tranquil, so composed, and so unaffected that you are completely unreadable, they lose more than just influence over you, they lose mastery over themselves. Your serenity becomes their undoing. Your unpredictability is their personal storm. They anticipated a breakdown, a desperate plea, a furious reaction. But you offered none of those things. Instead, you evolved. You converted adversity into insight. And that newfound, quiet wisdom is now their greatest dread. They cannot fathom how you forge ahead without seeking retribution, how you achieved healing without needing final words. Because for them, that journey is impossible. Their vitality stems from generating instability. Now, they are the ones caught in a state of bewilderment. Their existence is a cycle of provocation. Who can they agitate? Who can they govern? Who can they dismantle? But you withdrew the very sustenance they needed, your emotional engagement. And when a master manipulator loses their target, they forfeit their identity. You became untethered. You achieved liberation. And for those who subsist on exerting power, freedom is the ultimate menace. It vividly exposes their inner void. It is a stark reminder that control is merely a mirage, that supremacy is fleeting, and that the truth ultimately triumphs in silence when they are utterly stumped by you. They begin to obsessively revisit every conversation, every misrepresentation, every maneuver, trying to locate the precise moment they lost their hold. They scrutinize your calmness as if it were an assault, because they know, deep down, that their influence is terminated. The very composure they once ridiculed now torments them. It signifies that they never truly possessed you. They cannot reconcile the fact that your current resilience was forged in the crucible of the pain they inflicted. Every slight, every violation, every hostile verdict, all culminated in a person who is beyond their comprehension. You cease being the individual who required affirmation. You stopped providing explanations. You quit attempting to validate your worth. And that very hush, which they labeled presumption, is, in fact, absolute clarity. You now perceive reality exactly as it is. And once a fundamental truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. This is the reality they simply cannot endure. Your clarity illuminates their confusion. Your inner stillness underscores their disarray. You have become the unflinching mirror, reflecting everything they desperately tried to conceal about themselves. Their elaborate self-image is collapsing. They desire to be viewed as influential, yet without your participation, they are insignificant. They sought to project authority, but without your reaction, they are impotent. This is the consequence when someone loses the one person who saw through their facade. It is not the genuine loss of you that shatters them. It is the loss of their command over you. Now, every time they witness your ascent, every mention of your name, every recollection of how you remain unbroken, it acts as a persistent corrosive agent to their ego. This isn't simple hatred. It is jealousy masked as resentment. They crave your strength. They wish they could simply walk away as you did, but they are utterly confined by their own vanity. They remain trapped, desperately attempting to restore their self-importance while feigning detachment. The real meaning of power, meanwhile, you stand free, completely disengaged from their limited universe. Your value is no longer determined by their acceptance or rejection. This is where many misunderstand the true nature of authority. Real power isn't about raising your voice. It isn't about prevailing in trivial disputes. It is not vengeance or tyranny. It is stillness. It is deliberate restraint. It is the profound capacity to walk away while possessing the ultimate truth and uttering nothing. This quality of strength cannot be taught. It is earned through enduring tribulation, disappointment, and humiliation. And once you acquire it, it is unassailable. They can't figure you out because you have stopped needing to be comprehended. You ceased explaining your growth to those who are determined to misinterpret you. You recognize that your purpose is not to invalidate their position, but to progress and construct a life that renders their previous betrayal inconsequential. And that is the reason for their internal rupture. While you systematically rebuilt yourself, they stagnated, still relying on scheming, pretense, and coercion. They remain engaged in a trivial conflict that you abandoned long ago. Their persistent attention on you is not rooted in affection or concern. It stems from bafflement. They cannot process the fact that you are no longer accessible neither emotionally nor mentally. For individuals like them, witnessing someone they once dominated now existing in absolute liberty is a form of cognitive distress. It is essential to grasp this truth. Being misunderstood by limited minds is simply the price of being designed for something greater. They cannot grasp your path because you no longer belong in their small world. You have outgrown their triviality, their falsehoods, their incessant games. And when you advance beyond someone's level of comprehension, you become a threat to their deception. That's why they circulate rumors, why they distort narratives, why they attempt to re-engage you. They are trying to lure you back into the quagmire of chaos that feeds their power. Do not return. Let them face the consequences. Let them suffer the internal confusion they meticulously generated. For the universe possesses a mechanism for restoring equilibrium. The very qualities they attempted to eradicate in you have now become the agents of their own demise. Your tranquility is their sentence. Your silence is their exposure. Your evolution is their downfall. They cannot fathom how someone they so profoundly underestimated became the single lesson. They cannot escape. But that is the way truth operates. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't engage in pursuit. It simply stands resolute and allows fabrications to destroy themselves. So, continue to be unflappable, continue to be composed, continue to be an enigma. Let them wrestle with their uncertainty. Let them analyze every unspoken moment. Because one day, they will have the stark realization that the person they tried to manipulate was, in fact, their wake-up call. And by the time that dawning arrives, you will be too far ahead for them to ever reach again. That is the true face of resolve. Not a demand for revenge, not a hunger for external validation, but an inner peace that is unshakable. When you attain that state, no one can truly figure you out. They will continue to stumble, while you continue your ascent. When you halt the reaction, you cut off their entire power supply. Individuals who rely on manipulation and emotional disruption do not genuinely seek understanding or calm. They crave response. They meticulously track your emotions. They probe your limits. They push your boundaries simply to observe what breaks you. Every time you react with anger or distress, they feel a sense of vindication. It reassures them that they still matter, that they still hold influence. But when you cease to react, when you become utterly still, composed, and disengaged, you snatch that validation away. You create a void around them, and this is something they are completely unequipped to handle. Your response was their life force. Your calm is now their suffocation. They cannot endure silence because it confirms their irrelevance in your emotional sphere. They cannot feed on what you refuse to give. Therefore, your silence is not a weakness. It is a form of dominance. It is psychological authority in its most unadulterated form. It is the precise instant when the person who once exerted control realizes you have completely unplugged from their elaborate game. You have stepped out of the confined space they constructed to keep you perpetually entangled in conflict. Now, they are left to contend with their own hollowness. They will try anything in direct provocations, messaging, spreading rumors, or feigning happiness anything to elicit a reaction. But your immovable stillness renders all their efforts pointless. When their customary tactics lose their potency, they begin to fracture. Your silence is not avoidance. It is insight. It is the recognition that your energy is precious. Not every individual deserves your voice, your sentiment, or your limited time. Those who twist your words do not merit your detailed explanations. Those who never genuinely listen do not deserve your hard-won truth. When you stop trying to persuade them of your perspective, you liberate yourself from their sphere of control. You come to the profound realization that genuine peace is discovered not in convincing others, but in understanding your own self. They cannot grasp this fundamental shift because their life is built on drama, not self-reflection. They do not seek to heal. They only seek to distract. They do not reflect. They merely project. And when you decisively remove yourself from their ongoing emotional spectacle, they are compelled to confront a truth they have successfully evaded their entire lives. Without someone to manipulate, they are left with nothing. This realization is what utterly destroys them internally, because their entire concept of self is rooted in how others react to them. Their self-regard is parasitic. It thrives only by feeding on the emotional energy of others. But now, they are starving. They are desperate to draw you back in, even through negativity, because any form of attention, even animosity, feels preferable to the cold indifference they now face. Yet, what they fail to understand is that your silence is not indifference. It is deep healing. You have made the quiet decision to stop justifying your pain to the very people who inflicted it. You have chosen to let the universal principle of cause and effect handle what your words could never accomplish. That single decision, quiet, unwavering, and firm, is the most formidable power you could ever wield. There is something deeply disconcerting to manipulators about a person who simply refuses to react. It is a stark reminder that they never held any actual control in the first place. They only had the exact amount of power that you permitted them to have. They only won the battles that you chose to fight. When you stop fighting, the game concludes, and that is why they are breaking. They are clueless about what to do next. When you cease providing them with emotional fuel, their ego begins to collapse under its own immense weight. They replay conversations. They second-guess their actions. They begin to spiral mentally. Because your silence forces them to face who they are when you are no longer there to play their necessary role, they come to realize that, all along, you were the center of stability. You were the one holding the fabric together while they desperately tried to tear you apart. They used to misinterpret your composure as weakness. They mistook your fundamental kindness for naivety. But now they see it with strength cleverly concealed as patience. You were observing, not reacting. You were learning, not losing, and now that you have walked away, that same profound strength has become their catastrophe. You are no longer accessible for their toxic drama, and this is what they cannot reconcile because chaos is their comfort zone. They thrive in the ambiguity of confusion, falsehoods, and emotional imbalance. But your silence introduces clarity, and clarity is their natural adversary. It exposes the uncomfortable truth about them, who they are, when no one remains to sustain their delusion of absolute control. Your persistent calmness compels them to engage with their inner self. And that, for them, is the most terrifying place to be. It is the void where all their inadequacies surface, where the fabricated persona they project to the world begins to disintegrate. They are forced to confront the realization that they were not the pillar of strength. You were. They weren't in control. You were simply choosing not to participate. And that quiet, powerful choice has now rendered them powerless. There is a profound irony in this. They expended so much energy trying to crush you, but ultimately, your peace is the force that shatters them. When you respond, you merely prolong the narrative. When you embrace silence, you bring the story to an end. That is why silence serves as the ultimate form of closure. It requires no defense. It demands no validation. It simply conveys, I have witnessed enough. I have learned enough. And I now elect for peace. This choice carries significant gravity. It utterly destabilizes individuals who rely on your turmoil, because it demonstrates that your self-worth is no longer contingent upon their recognition. You have reclaimed your own voice by refusing to use it in a space where it would be squandered. It is, admittedly, difficult at first. Silence often feels unsettling. The intense urge to speak, to justify, to defend will rise. However, that impulse originates from old wounds, from the deep-seated need to be understood by those whose intention was never to understand you. When you transcend that urge, you discover true freedom. You begin to recognize that silence is not empty. It is, in fact, replete with answers. It is the sound of strength being restored to your core. It is the definitive moment when you acknowledge that you do not owe anyone your reaction. You do not owe anyone an explanation for your personal boundaries. People will inevitably label you as cold. They will declare that you have fundamentally changed. They will call you aloof or emotionally detached. Let them. Because they cannot comprehend the profound liberation that accompanies walking away quietly. They do not understand the inner discipline it takes to remain composed when every instinct screams to engage. That discipline is your victory. It is your unequivocal declaration. Your influence over me has ended, so let them speculate. Let them invent stories. Let them desperately pursue the closure they will never receive. Your silence resonates far louder than any confrontation ever could. It proclaims, I am finished playing small. I am finished being predictable. I am finished justifying my pain to the individuals who inflicted it. And that undeniable truth will reverberate in their minds exponentially longer than any words. You might have spoken, for silence, when it is born from inner strength, is not an absence of feeling. It is the mastery of it. And the person who achieves mastery over their emotions becomes untouchable. This is the root cause of their collapse. They cannot endure the fact that you are no longer supplying the energy they once relied upon. They cannot bear that you are unbothered, unyielding, and immersed in peace. Your silence systematically dismantles their illusion of power day by day, until the only thing remaining is the uncomfortable reality they tried so hard to evade. They never truly had you, and now, by the will of God, they never will again. With every step you take in your personal development, you expose what they have tried to conceal. People who depend on manipulation and control cannot tolerate your evolution, because your growth serves as a constant, unflinching mirror to everything they have intentionally avoided within themselves. They constructed their power by attempting to keep you diminished, by convincing you that you were flawed, that you were insufficient, that you required their approval to feel worthy. But the very second you begin to outgrow their grasp, that entire illusion shatters. Your progress becomes their punishment because it highlights their own stagnation. They cannot look upon you without feeling the immense burden of their own failure. When you actively embrace healing, when you begin to speak your truth, when you refuse the assigned role they gave you, You simultaneously seize control of their narrative. They can no longer distort reality because your actions now narrate the story far more powerfully than their falsehoods ever could. They desired you to remain broken because broken individuals are inherently easier to control. They never wanted you to find clarity because clarity makes you impossible to dominate. But you accomplished something entirely unexpected. You transformed affliction into purpose. You took the very injuries they caused and utilized them as fuel to become profoundly stronger. This is what truly destroys them. It is not your success itself. It is the irrefutable fact that you succeeded without needing them. They cannot cope with the reality that your inner radiance no longer requires their explicit permission. You are no longer justifying, pursuing, or defending. You simply exist as proof that their attempt to destroy you failed. Your peace, your unwavering confidence, your renewed energy, it all illuminates what they lack. Because deep down, they recognize they have not grown. They remain stuck in the same toxic patterns, the same resentment, the same deception. You, conversely, possess a tranquility they cannot possibly emulate. It is the specific peace that arises from surviving what was designed to annihilate you. When someone steeped in control witnesses your unwavering strength, it consumes them internally because it proves that their manipulation had boundaries. They mistakenly believed they owned your emotions, but your growth showed them the absolute opposite. They cannot process how you achieved healing without their apology, how you rebuilt yourself without their intervention, or how you discovered profound meaning amidst the chaos they engineered. That very confusion is their undoing. It reveals the extent to which they were utterly dependent on your weakness. And now, stripped of that weakness, they are adrift. They cannot possibly control a version of you that no longer exists. They continue to address your past self, while you are actively living as your evolved self. And that gaping distance between who you were and who you have become is what is systematically destroying them. Your growth doesn't merely expose their frailty, it exposes the truth about your dynamic. You were the giver. You were the person who carried empathy, patience, and loyalty. They were the taker. They drained your energy, showed disrespect for your effort, and assumed you would never walk away because they equated your kindness with weakness. But growth taught you that kindness without firm boundaries leads to self-destruct. So, you drew the line, and that boundary, that quiet, resolute refusal to continue enduring their behavior is what ultimately shattered their control. Because boundaries force manipulators to face what they fear most, accountability. They cannot tolerate accountability because it exposes their predictable patterns. It reveals that the chaos they consistently blamed on everyone else was always emanating from within them. But now that you have definitively stepped out of their narrative, they have no one left onto whom they can project their issues. They are compelled to confront the unbearable reality they created for themselves. They will try to distract themselves by gossiping about you, by rewriting the history, by attempting to convince others that they were the casualty. But the truth always finds a path to the surface, and your growth makes that truth impossible to overlook the further you ascend. The more it erodes their spirit, not because they genuinely care about your success, but because it entirely invalidates their control. They invested so much effort trying to define you, and now you have redefined yourself completely. You are no longer the broken, predictable version they could manipulate. You have become someone they cannot even begin to recognize. That profound transformation is a direct threat to everything they believe about themselves. It forces them to see how superficial their influence truly was. They used to believe they were superior, but now they are the ones falling apart. While you are deliberately constructing a life rooted in peace and clear purpose, you must grasp the sheer power of this fundamental shift. When you heal, you irrevocably alter the energy field around you. You cease attracting chaos because chaos no longer feels familiar. You stop attempting to fix people who are content in their brokenness. You stop chasing forced apologies and start actively creating distance. That is the authentic look of genuine growth. It is not loud or extravagant. It is quiet. It is steady. It is when your silence takes the place of arguments, your peace replaces pain, and your detachment replaces desperation. And the people who once controlled you simply cannot endure that transformation because it removes them entirely from the center of your universe. They will undoubtedly attempt to provoke you, to invoke memories of the past, to make you doubt yourself again. This is not rooted in care. It is because they cannot bear to watch you win. They cannot accept that you are finally living free of their shadow. But your only necessary response should be to keep growing, keep improving, keep shining quietly. Because absolutely nothing is more agonizing for a manipulator than witnessing their former target become utterly untouchable. They cannot possibly compete with the version of you who learned to cherish peace more than external validation. Growth is not revenge, but it feels exactly like it to those who try to govern you. Your new strength exposes their weakness so deeply that they begin to despise what they see reflected back at them. They observe your composure and realize their own constant restlessness. They observe your discipline and realize their own lost state. They see your self-respect and realize they have never possessed it. That realization is corrosive because it is irreversible. You cannot unsee your own growth, and they cannot unsee their own decline. What breaks them most profoundly is the awareness that you accomplished it without hatred. You had no need to destroy them. You simply outgrew them. You had no need to scream or prove a single thing. You simply moved differently. You elevated yourself from pain to a higher purpose. And that quiet elevation is something they will never attain because it necessitates humility and genuine self-reflection to qualities they have always violently avoided. You healed, and they did not. You faced yourself, and they fled from themselves. That is why your growth is such an absolute threat. It illuminates the crucial difference between authentic transformation and mere pretense. So, never feel any guilt for outgrowing people who stubbornly refuse to evolve. Your growth does not make you arrogant. It makes you aware. It signifies that you have chosen peace over chaos, purpose over pain, and self-respect over approval. The people who genuinely love you will celebrate that unequivocally. The ones who used you will resent it, but that resentment is no longer your burden. It is their mirror, because, at the end of the day, your growth stands as undeniable proof that you survived, adapted, and became stronger than the person they desperately tried to crush. That is why they cannot bear to look at you now. You remind them that the power they thought they held over you was never real. You were always capable. You simply had not yet realized it. And now that you have, they are compelled to face the truth you have known all along. Your evolution is their complete exposure. What destroys them is not losing you, but losing their grip on you. People who thrive on manipulation and emotional disruption do not love you. They love the control they possess over you. They cherish the version of you that is ridden with self-doubt. The version that justifies, apologizes, and compromises their integrity to maintain an artificial peace. That is the only version they could possibly dominate. But the moment you emotionally, mentally, and spiritually detach, they panic. Because you have taken away the single entity that gave them power. Your responsive energy. Their control was always illusory. It was merely borrowed from your willingness to care. And now that you have definitively withdrawn that vital energy, they are left powerless, exposed, and desperate to reclaim it. Control-obsessed individuals cannot operate without a degree of emotional chaos. They depend on keeping you perpetually off balance, so when you stand firm, composed, and absolutely indifferent. They begin to lose control not over you, but over themselves. You become a mirror that they cannot endure looking into. Your peace glaringly exposes their deep-seated instability. Your emotional maturity highlights their immaturity. Your ability to remain calm while they spiral destroys them more effectively than any heated argument ever could, because now the chaos resides only within them. You have left it far behind. Their most profound apprehension is the dawning recognition that they never genuinely commanded influence over you. The control was an internal construct, residing entirely within their own perception. What they managed to manipulate was your temporary emotional state, not your fundamental spirit. They could sway your feelings momentarily, but they could never possess your inner being. That realization hits them with devastating force when you cease all engagement, when you stop providing justifications, when you stop reacting impulsively, when you stop striving for their comprehension. That is the moment they understand that the game is irrevocably over. Not the relationship, but their deep-seated illusion of dominance. They will attempt to resuscitate that illusion by any available means. They might initiate contact, feign genuine concern, or act as if they have undergone a fundamental transformation. They may even try to ignite jealousy by showcasing a new partner, or pretending to have moved on effortlessly. However, all of these maneuvers stem from sheer panic. The individual who has genuinely moved forward has no need to demonstrate it. Everything they undertake after losing control is a desperate performance, meticulously designed to emotionally re-ensnare you. But the beauty of your evolution is that you now see right through the act. You refuse to take the bait. You no longer feel the need to defend your position. You simply allow their actions to serve as their own indictment, and within that powerful silence, they begin their irreversible unraveling. When an individual loses their power over you, they simultaneously begin to lose their grip on reality. Their self-identity starts to collapse. Because their entire ego was constructed around the principle of control, they start questioning why their manipulative tactics no longer yield results, why you exhibit no reaction, why you are not pursuing any form of closure. They will obsessively revisit every past interaction, searching for a single clue. They will discuss you with others, trying desperately to understand the catalyst for change. But the change was elegantly simple. You awakened. You saw through the elaborate illusion. You realized that profound peace is not found in prevailing over arguments or proving petty points. It is discovered in walking away from people who require your subservience to validate their own fragile sense of self-importance. And here is the ultimate truth. You cannot control a person who has absolutely nothing left to prove. The very instant you stop attempting to justify your inherent worth, you become untouchable. They are free to insult you, spread rumors about you, distort your words, but it no longer adheres to you because you have achieved detachment. Their opinion ceases to define you. Their approval is rendered entirely irrelevant. That is the deepest form of freedom you can ever experience. It is a level of strength they will never comprehend, for it requires humility, self-awareness, and ironclad emotional discipline, qualities they have consistently failed to cultivate. Their entire world begins to disintegrate without your consistent emotional involvement. You represented the anchor of stability in their chaotic existence. You were the one who maintained calm, who repaired the destruction they caused, who buffered the fallout of their behavior. Without your presence, their carefully crafted mask begins to slip. They can no longer sustain the pretense. People start to see the truth, not because you went out of your way to expose them, but because you stopped protecting them. You cease covering for their destructive behavior, and the truth, by its very nature, began to reveal itself naturally. That is the inevitable consequence of reclaiming your personal energy. Everything built on falsehood begins to collapse. And deep within their core, they know this is true. They know they pushed too far. They know they catastrophically underestimated your resilience. They know the control they once boasted about was nothing more than a temporary mirage. That profound realization torments them, because it forces them to confront the truth about their own character. They never possessed true power. They had permission. And once that permission was decisively withdrawn, they were left with nothing, true strength. You see, does not originate from controlling the lives of others. It comes from mastering your own internal landscape, from knowing precisely when to speak and when to remain completely silent, from discerning who is deserving of your finite energy and who is merely a drain on it. And that is the crucial lesson they perpetually avoided. You learned it. That is why they are spiraling downward while you are steadily rebuilding your life. Your peace was born from releasing their control, and their ensuing chaos is the direct result of losing it. So, when they attempt to lure you back, when they test your resolve with guilt or hostility, commit these to memory. Their attempts are not expressions of love. They are undeniable signs of panic. They are not seeking to genuinely reconnect. They are desperately attempting to regain control. But you are fundamentally different. You have decisively outgrown their trivial games. You have successfully reclaimed your personal and emotional space, and now they cannot reach you. Not because you are in hiding, but because you have risen too far above for their manipulation to have any hold. That is the authentic feeling of real freedom, when their chaos can no longer disturb your peace, when their unsolicited opinions can no longer shape your self-worth, when you no longer feel the need to justify anything to the person who tried to destroy you. That is when you know you have won, not through overt vengeance, but through absolute detachment, because nothing causes a manipulator more severe psychological pain than the realization that the person they once controlled simply no longer cares. They cannot bear that loss. It is not your physical absence that haunts them. It is your total emotional detachment. It is the moment they finally realize that the power they believed they held over you was never actually real. You simply decided they would never have it again. When you stop seeking validation from the people who once dominated you, something truly remarkable occurs. They lose their functional power. They start to spiral, to crash. Because the entire superstructure of their control was fundamentally built upon your reaction. Your silence, your composure, your refusal to play their game, it all unnerves them profoundly. For years, they convinced themselves they could predict you, manipulate you, and treat your emotions like switches they could flip at will. But when you stopped responding in their expected manner, their entire grand illusion of control shattered into pieces. People who thrive on exerting control cannot possibly survive in an environment of uncertainty. They desperately crave predictability because it provides them with false reassurance that they are the ones in charge. When you stop feeding that system, when you stop granting them access to your precious emotional energy, they are left starkly exposed to their own inner emptiness. They start to overthink, meticulously replaying every interaction in their minds, questioning exactly where they lost their grasp. They analyze your old words and actions, trying to decode the failure. But the true underlying event is this: they are confronting the terrifying realization that you have definitively outgrown them. You have stepped out of the psychological trap they constructed to contain you. They cannot comprehend how you managed to achieve such detachment without warning, how you managed to move forward without the necessary confrontation or formal closure. That is what genuinely breaks them. It is not your anger that destroys them. It is your unshakable peace. It is your outright refusal to provide them with the chaos they require for survival. When you cease reacting, you create a profound void they cannot tolerate. They crave drama, explosive arguments, And tears because those specific reactions make them feel relevant. When you withhold that, you force them to face the truth that they never mattered as much as they believed they did. Your indifference is not merely silence. It is an undeniable statement. It says, you possess no control over me anymore. And the fragile mind of a manipulative individual cannot bear that. Their ego feeds aggressively on attention, even if that attention is entirely negative. So when you effectively disappear from their emotional world, when you stop explaining yourself, they begin to lose the fabricated sense of superiority, around which they built their entire identity. They start to crumble internally because you have removed the very mirror they relied on to validate themselves. There is also a deeper psychological truth at play. When someone dedicates their life to controlling others, they are doing it to desperately avoid confronting their own deep-seated insecurities. Control serves as their primary defense mechanism against inner chaos. But when they lose control over you, they are compelled to confront the actual chaos within themselves, the fear, the shame, and the consuming emptiness they have been perpetually running from. And that confrontation is brutal. They resort to projecting, blaming, trying to convince every person they meet that you have drastically changed, that you have become distant or arrogant. But deep down, they know the truth. They know they lost the one person who truly saw them, who tolerated their flaws, who gave them grace they never earned. And now, without you to absorb their chaos, they are left only with their own unbearable reflection. People like this cannot function without emotional leverage. They absolutely need to know they can still reach you, that they can still force a reaction. But when your growth eliminates that possibility, when your calmness becomes utterly unshakable, they experience what is correctly termed ego collapse. It is a complete psychological unraveling of their false identity. They cannot process how someone they once utterly dominated now looks at them with such quiet, profound detachment. They interpret it as ultimate rejection, betrayal, and deep humiliation. And that is why they commence their collapse. They engage in self-sabotage, desperately trying to prove they are still in charge. They make impulsive decisions, lash out, spread malicious lies, or even try to mimic your growth. But none of it succeeds because all of it is rooted in desperation. They are not growing. They are scrambling that meanwhile, you continue your evolution. You have internalized the truth that control is merely a game for people who are paralyzed by uncertainty. You have accepted that you cannot possibly change others. You can only achieve mastery over yourself. And that mastery, that inner stability, becomes the very quality they envy most in the world. They cannot figure out how you remain so composed, how you don't chase them, how you don't respond to their latest provocations. But that profound calm did not appear from nowhere. It was forged in pain. It came from the radical realization that your peace is non-negotiable, that you do not owe anyone an emotional reaction under any circumstances. You made the active choice to stop trying to be understood by people who were entirely committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped explaining your worth to those who never genuinely intended to value it. And that is the pivotal moment when everything profoundly shifted. You stopped needing to prove that you are right or good or loyal. You completely let go of the need to fix the things they broke. You finally understood that your silence is infinitely stronger than any argument. Because silence cannot be twisted. Silence cannot be manipulated. Silence forces people to face the full consequences of their actions without a single distraction. And for the individuals who thrive on your emotional availability, that silence becomes absolutely deafening. They start to crumble under the sheer weight of their own confusion and underlying guilt. They begin to realize that they didn't just lose a person. They lost their entire emotional power source. The final irony is that they will try to interpret your magnificent calmness as arrogance. your distance as coldness. But you know the truth better than anyone. It is not that you have become hardened. It is that you have achieved absolute clarity. You no longer waste precious energy proving your intentions or defending your well-defined boundaries. You have decisively outgrown the necessity for chaos. You have internalized the truth that peace is not a passive state. It is a potent form of power, the kind that holds no need to raise its voice or prove its existence. And that very power is the one thing they will never fully comprehend. So allow them to crash. Permit them to spiral endlessly as they attempt to decode your silence. You owe them absolutely no explanation for your process of healing. You are under no obligation to make your growth comfortable for those individuals who benefited directly from your suffering. You must simply continue to move forward with grace and measured restraint. Because the moment you stopped needing to govern how others perceived you, you took the definitive step into genuine freedom. And for those who once held sway over you, that liberation is the single greatest punishment they will ever endure. When you evolve beyond the version of yourself they once knew, you become utterly unrecognizable to them. That is precisely why their reality crashes. They are incapable of comprehending the person you have become. You are no longer the individual who tolerated disrespect, who perpetually justified intentions, or who sought validation from people who had no intention of granting it. You have changed in ways they neither anticipated nor can understand. And this unnerves them to their core. They believe they could easily predict your responses, that they had you entirely figured out. They constructed their entire identity around knowing precisely how to pull your emotional strings. But now, every time they look in your direction, every time they hear your name mentioned or see your unwavering silence, they are confronted with the devastating reality that they no longer possess any access to your mind, your emotions, or your world. This profound confusion consumes them. It is not merely the loss of your presence. It is the fact that they cannot fathom how you rebuilt yourself after the damage they inflicted. They remember vividly the moments they attempted to break your spirit, the words they used to diminish your self-assurance, the specific manipulations engineered to make you doubt your worth. They assumed you would remain wounded, predictably reactive, and easily manipulated. But instead, you converted that pain into an absolute power. You became composed, calm, and emotionally inaccessible to their tired tactics. They fully expected you to pursue closure or validation. Instead, you moved forward in silence, and that silence has become exponentially louder than any confrontation ever could be. You must understand that people who perpetually manipulate others always operate under the delusion of complete control. They fundamentally rely on your desperate need to explain, to justify your actions, and to constantly prove your inherent worth. The very moment you cease these actions, their entire fragile sense of superiority crumbles. They begin to seriously question themselves. What exactly happened? Why are they no longer reacting? Why do they appear fundamentally stronger now? That level of confusion is torture to a manipulator's ego because, deep down, they know the simple, terrifying answer. You outgrew them. You successfully learned to detach emotionally. You stopped operating your life from a place of fear. And once fear is entirely eliminated, their control dies with it. What they simply cannot accept is that your growth is genuine. They cling to the belief that it is just an act, a temporary emotional phase, something you are doing specifically to elicit a reaction from them. But the passage of time proves them unequivocally wrong, because true transformation is not focused on revenge. It is focused on evolution. It is about becoming so internally centered and grounded that absolutely no one can shake your peace again. That specific kind of strength is rare, and it is something they will never fully comprehend because it requires profound self-awareness, a quality they have strategically avoided their entire lives. They cannot figure out how you continue to stand tall after everything they put you through. They cannot wrap their minds around the fact that you didn't just survive. You actively thrived. They fully expected you to remain diminished, to keep explaining every move, to keep proving your goodness. But now you walk with an internal, quiet confidence, entirely free of the need for anyone's external validation. You do not chase them. You do not beg for attention. You do not try to convince anyone of your worth. And that unwavering certainty unsettles them because it utterly breaks every single rule of the toxic game they used to play with you. They cannot win if you refuse to play. They begin to experience a feeling that is utterly alien to them, powerlessness. The exact control they once possessed is entirely gone, and they are left frantically scrambling to somehow regain it. Some will try to provoke you once more, desperately hoping for any kind of emotional reaction. Others will attempt to feign deep remorse, hoping to pull you back into their well-worn emotional web. But your personal growth has made you immune to manipulation. You now see through all of their transparent patterns. You no longer respond from a place of raw emotion. You respond from profound awareness. And that awareness is the force that truly destroys their illusion of control. Because they finally realize you have become the one thing they feared most, untouchable. And this is not rooted in arrogance. It is rooted in knowing your intrinsic value. You have learned that your peace is your sacred responsibility. You have learned that not every person deserves access to your energy simply because they once had it. You have learned that not all expressions of affection are pure, not all loyalty is authentic, and not all apologies signify true change. This fundamental understanding changed everything for you. You no longer consent to half-hearted connections or manipulative attempts at peace. You know that your energy is sacred, and you fiercely protect it as if your life depends on it because it absolutely does.